del Manual de Gestión de Activos que ustedes ya conocen, y el capítulo 5 es sobre recopilación y uso de datos adecuados para una gestión de activos eficaz. Entonces, bueno, Vladimir es uno de los expertos principales que elaboró el manual y especialmente el capítulo 5. Él está basado en Macedonia, en Europa, y será quien nos guíe principalmente por el contenido el día de hoy. Please, Vladimir, go ahead. I believe you're muted, Vlado.
Thank you, Fernando. I'm sorry. Buenos días, señoras y señores. Bienvenidos al segundo diálogo de soluciones en línea. Solutions. Now I'm presenting from North Macedonia, which is situated in the eastern part of Europe, and it's just above Greece and in between Bulgaria and Albania from east and west, and on the north, Serbia. So I would like to know, where are you located? So if you can please switch on the Menti, please, one. So everybody can pin your location. So I'd like to see, where are you all located? Fernando? Can I have a first Menti, please? Oh, I can see now. There's some people from Europe, Spain, France. Most of them there in Latin America, from Argentina, Ecuador. Okay, Mexico too. Yeah. Okay, Fernando, go ahead.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias. Vemos principalmente que tenemos algunos participantes de Argentina, México, Chile, Paraguay, Colombia, algunas partes de Europa como España. Entonces, muchas gracias. Nos da una muy buena idea de dónde vienen nuestros participantes. 19 personas, por ejemplo, en Colombia. Perfecto, muchas gracias. Please, Vladimir, go ahead.
Next slide, please. Before we run into today's online solution dialogues topics, let me recap of the main topics from yesterday's works. We saw yesterday why is data very important, what data do you have to collect about your assets, and how to set up an asset information system. Developing a valuable asset management information system is extensive and often costly process that requires long-term commitment, not only by asset management team members, but from all involved in continuously improving service performance in the aspect of reduced operating cost of the municipalities or public utility, and improved organization, functionality, efficiency. Furthermore, it's a process that requires data, so the information results are just as good as the data inputs. So what data we saw yesterday that we have to collect, and we do understand that the biggest challenge for all municipality is collecting the right, reliable and validated data, data that decision makers in the local government need to make decisions and to achieve the goal. That goal must be defined in the strategies for development of sustainable local infrastructure. For all we said, we need to need to set integrated asset management information system for our infrastructure database registry, going through 8 steps. We saw yesterday all 8 steps. Let me briefly remind you about them. The first step is we have to get organized. In developing an asset, can you click on the mouse, please, so we can see the first step? Click all of them. Yes, all of them. Yes, thank you. The animation remains from the one of the previous slides, versions of them. So the first step was how to develop asset management information team. And what is important that this team will have a commitment, and it's daily work. It's not only a project, but it's a continuous process. And this team will be forever in your organization. The next step is how to design asset register hierarchy. It's the same system like most of the accountants and project managements they use and IT engineers use in your computer. It's a methodology called work breakdown structure. So you break down all the assets in your municipality, starting from the top up to the last one, which is the maintenance item. For example, if you have a pump that has the latest asset type, that should be the latest asset management or maintenance item, not the filter, because the filter is a spare part. Next step, we saw how to collect and select the data sources. From where? Either from various sources, from the AutoCAD drawings, from the history of the maintenance, or other documents what you have in your organization or municipality. Then, very important step is how to plan the data collection. That should be a written plan, who, when, what, and how we have to collect our data. The next step we saw on-site job, or how to capture the data, what type of data, and on the end we have to validate the data and to estimate what our data are they accurate, are there any inaccuracy in our data, so we can use for sure for future steps in analyzing the data. When we are sure that our data is quite accurate, Marshall says yesterday about 80-20 rule, then we can establish our register for sure, but we are not finished there. There is another step, 8, when we have a constantly maintaining and updating data. So these are the 8 steps we have seen yesterday and we have been going through. So I would like to know which of the steps in setting asset management information has enhanced your knowledge from presentation yesterday. So maybe Fernando can start pulling out.
Los invitamos a contestar la siguiente encuesta. Ya deben estar viendo aquí la ventana. Y la pregunta es, ¿cuál de los siguientes pasos en el desarrollo de sistemas de información ha mejorado su conocimiento sobre el desarrollo de bases de datos sobre activos de infraestructura? Y es de opción múltiple. Pueden seleccionar distintas opciones relacionadas con los pasos que vimos ayer y que ahora han sido resumidos. Entonces, empezamos a ver aquí algunas respuestas. Por ejemplo, cómo seleccionar fuentes de datos, 47%. Cómo formar un equipo efectivo para la gestión de activos, 43%. Cómo planificar la recolección de datos, que sin duda es bastante importante. Cómo validar los datos, 35%. Y aquí vemos los resultados finales. Vemos que la respuesta que más fue seleccionada fue cómo diseñar un registro de activos jerarquizado, que de hecho se relaciona con la tarea del día de ayer en la que ustedes podrán trabajar en estos días. Cómo formar un equipo también tuvo 44%. Cómo seleccionar fuentes de datos también. Y un poco menos algunas otras como cómo mantener y actualizar el registro de activos, validar datos, etc. Excelente. Nos da una buena idea de qué pasos les han servido a ustedes para la conformación de un sistema de este tipo. Muchas gracias a todos por participar. Please, Vladimir, go ahead.
Thank you, Fernando. We saw that most of the topics we saw yesterday are very important in setting asset management system. And if you ask me which is the most important one, I think it's the step number when we plan how to collect and how to validate the data. So this is the document which every organization has to see and to follow up. Without a plan, you cannot reach, you cannot collect. It's going to be a chaos. Okay, next slide, please. So today, for today, we have to outline. Can you go one slide back, please? Today, we're going to go through three main asset management information system topics. So the first one is analysis of asset information and utilizing data for strategic, tactical, and operational asset management. We're going to use many internet tools like Zoom polls, Mentimeter, Google Forms in breakout work sessions, and presenting simple Excel spreadsheet tools that could help you in a future asset management daily work. So the purpose of these tools, so you can download them from the site, or we can send them to your email by your request. So please feel free that you can use them, alter them, whatever you can modify to fit your requirements in the future. So a first step in the first topic, why information system is needed for strategic, tactical, and operational assets. Before hoping to understand what information is needed, it is important to understand why asset information is needed. Without this, it can become just a case of information for information's sake. Information is needed to support one or more defined local government's business process. For example, at strategic level, information will support the strategic objectives. For example, measures of increased municipal infrastructure level of service. We got that information for. Enhance infrastructure performance. We need information for that. Environmental information, or we need it for regulatory requirements. On a tactical level, those information will support technical policy development. For example, data information to support analysis of infrastructure when we have to renew the roads or to replace them, when we have to buy new medical equipment or potable water, or enhance the potable water quality, or how to define asset maintenance intervention policies. On operational level, we need information to deliver asset-related work through the efficient scheduling of resources for maintenance of assets. For example, water supply assets location data needed to perform maintenance works on site. So at the first topic, we're going to see first how we're going to calculate the depreciation of the assets. This is the purpose to establish the value of the assets, and how the accountants they calculate the value of the assets versus how the asset managers like we are in the future, or currently working as asset managers or the asset management team, we have to use the tools to value the assets. The next step is when we know the value, we have to estimate what are the critical assets and what are the risky assets in order to give the priorities what first has to be done, to replace or to renew, and on the end, we have to finalize financial and asset management plan. The next topic we're going to discuss about, it's about the second topic, it's about key performance indicators. These indicators are very important, how to measure our asset management plan, and appropriate data quality are established to monitor the quality of information on infrastructure assets. We need these indicators for information quality, accuracy or inaccuracy of the data, for asset management policies, and to monitor or evaluate our asset management action plan, effectiveness and infrastructure sustainability. On the end, we're going to see what indexes we need for municipal development and how to measure development of our municipality in terms of infrastructure, healthcare, education, and etc. On the end, we're going to repeat some information technology systems for local and national government. We should ask ourselves where to start, what tools shall we use, and if we are ready for it, and then we can purchase the software for future use. And what is the best available technology solutions to be incorporated in your organization, and about how we're going to use this information for our systems for our sustainability infrastructure. Next slide, please. So the overreaching goal of the asset management information system is to develop a framework of integrated decision support, taking into account three things: internal factors, external, and future developments. Internal factors with a focus of reliable data information for decision making, the link between municipal departments internally, and the local national organizations, strategic objectives, risk analysis, and integrated performance measurements of the organization. For external factors, it's needed information that will focus on the most relevant stakeholders. We saw yesterday which are important, and Linda was talking about these stakeholders, which are the end users. And the most important are the end users of our assets. Targeted communication to the stakeholders, how we communicate them with our stakeholders, and creation of social added value and sustainable solutions in the future. Future developments, we need to focus on increased stress on assets. That's why we need information. What's the stress will be in the future, and adaptation of new technologies, changing demography and patterns of various asset systems. Next slide, please. So what is the depreciation? We discussed yesterday about depreciation. We give the definition. Deduction of part of the asset value per specific rate is called depreciation. Whenever we purchase the asset, for example, if you see this graph on the right side of the slide, at the beginning of the time, we procure or the asset which has the value. Towards the time, because of the let's say use of the asset, it's starting the depreciation or losing value of the asset. It can be in linear depreciation, as it's line 1 on the graph, which means that for accounting and financial definition on this term relates to expected useful life of the infrastructure asset, and depreciation may be calculated on this basis on equal loss of the value in each year. Or as a percentage of its asset value on the start of each year. Well, we can see on the line 2, the dotted line there, some assets can, for example, from the first years of our use, and they depreciate they lose off the value very quickly on the beginning of the first years, and then towards the end, the amount of depreciation is smaller and smaller until the end, where we call it salvage or residual value of our assets. Number 3 is very important, and sometimes it happens when we, for example, at the beginning, when we build a road, and that road in that area doesn't serve anybody. It usually happens, for example, that part of the city, it's not developed, there are no buildings or whatever. So our road is standing by, used by nobody, and even not used by no end users. The depreciation is starting, but when the building will be, let's say, in the middle of the life, when we're going to use our asset is going to start quickly depreciate and losing value over time. In accounting terminology, depreciation is a systematic process of distributing the cost of fixed assets over the useful life of the asset. Next slide, please. Sorry, before we go there, we have to ask ourselves, there is a theory about upon expiry of our asset useful life, accumulated depreciation expenses could be used for the purpose of procurement of the same or similar asset. I would like to know from you, upon expiry of the asset's useful life, accumulated depreciation should be used for purchase. Is it true or false?
Muchas gracias a quienes ya están respondiendo a la pregunta. Sí, al vencimiento de la vida útil de un activo, la depreciación acumulada debe utilizarse para la compra del mismo o un activo similar. Entonces, casi 60% nos dice que esa afirmación es verdadera. 40% nos dice que es falsa. Al vencimiento de la vida útil del activo, la depreciación acumulada debe utilizarse para la compra del mismo activo o similar. Perfecto, 62% creen que es verdadero, 38% falso. Gracias. Please, Vladimir.
Thank you, Fernando. Those who answer the true, that it's true, because I expected that most of the answers to be never, but the polls results. Depreciation is the process, Depreciation is a process of allocating the cost of tangible assets over a period of time. And rather than deducting the cost and expenses in each year of acquisition, generally, at the end of the infrastructure asset service life, the sum of the amounts charged for depreciation in each accounting period will equal the original cost, less the salvage value. Moreover, depreciation is part of the tariff structure. That's why it's very important, because it's going to be part of the revenue, because the depreciation we are charging our customers in the tariff or tax structure. So it's coming to our accounts as a revenue. So this amount of money, it can be used and it should be used for renewal replacement of our assets. Most of the municipalities, they don't know, and they forgot about the investments in the future. So those who says that this amount of the depreciation should be used and must always for investments in the renewal or replacement of our assets. Thank you very much. Next slide. So how do we calculate the... Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, all of them. Thank you. How do we calculate the depreciation of accounting our assets. For financial or accounting reporting purposes, there are 5 common methods to calculate depreciation. Each is varying in complexity and accuracy. For example, first one, it's straightforward and very used in most of the municipalities, even all on the corporate companies. Straight line depreciation is the easiest method to calculate. Simply divide the asset basis by its useful service life to calculate the annual asset depreciation. For example, if we have bought one asset of $100,000 and the service line, estimated service line of this asset is 50 years, when we divided 100,000 by 50, the previous slide, sorry, it's $2,000. That's very simple method. Then we have the other methods, which is called diminishing or declining balance. You can see in the literature, which is very similar, which is using the straight line method. And at the beginning, we have to use a straight line and multiply that by book value from the beginning of the previous accounting period. The third one is a double declining balance method, which is doubling as the previous one. For example, if we have a 20% depreciation calculated by diminishing or declining balance, now we're going to have a 40%, which is double. The sum of the years is the asset cost multiplied by number of years of estimated life remaining for at the beginning of the year, divided by sum of the years digits. How it's going to calculate, we're going to see in some of the new slides. And the third one, and the fifth one, sorry, is the sum of the years units of production, which is very used for, let's say, vehicles or in production methods or windmills, or whatever assets we have that they're using for production. We just multiply units of production rate, but the units that are produced. Next slide, please. Now we're going to see through the examples, one by one. For example, straight line depreciation. If we have a hospital in our municipality and which build a new medical waste building, it costs for $20,000, but we built it in 2017, and the service life of 30 years and the residual life of 2000. How do we calculate? We calculate in the method that 20,000 minus 2,000, that is 18,000 divided by 30, it's 6,000. On the end, it's for the first year, we have 18,000 book value of our assets. This is very difficult, I mean, using a calculator. That's why on the right-hand side, you have an example how very simple Excel tool, very easy how to be calculated, and graphically presented the information, and you can have a visuality of how the depreciation the accountants are calculating. So we can go to Menti now and ask the question. We should ask a question. Which infrastructure asset category or types are appropriate using this straight line method? Just for tips. Okay, go ahead, Fernando. So.
Thank you, Vladimir. Les recordamos que acabamos de poner en el chat el link para que puedan ir a la pregunta de Menti, que es la línea recta es el método más apropiado para calcular la depreciación de qué categoría de activos. Entonces pueden ir ingresando hasta tres respuestas. Can we please see some of the results? La pregunta es, ¿el método de depreciación de línea recta para qué categoría de activos de infraestructura es más apropiado? El link está en el chat.
You can switch off the picture by pressing S. And then the results will come probably. Here we come.
Vemos algunas respuestas, Vladimir, like infrastructure, buildings, vehicles, constructions. So most common response, buildings, equipment, infrastructure, vehicles. Muchas gracias. Vemos algunas de las respuestas. La gran mayoría nos sugiere que el método de línea recta es más apropiado para edificios o edificaciones. Infraestructura y vehículos también tienen también bastantes respuestas. Edificaciones y vehículos son quizás las que más se repiten. So Vladimir, I think the most repeated answers are buildings, vehicles. Of course,
very interesting. Buildings, yes, we can use this method, but I'm not sure about vehicles. Vehicles, they don't last forever. I mean, as much as 30 or 40 or 50 years. So the most appropriate method for our infrastructure is, for example, for the roads, buildings, water supply systems. They last, for example, 30, 50 years. So the most appropriate method should be used for these types. Now we're going to go for diminishing balance, where we can use for the vehicles, for example, because on the beginning of the year, or the other equipment which they have a short period of time. Next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you for. Now we're going to see diminishing or declining balance. These two methods, the double diminishing and diminishing balance, are used for assets, for example, for computers, for vehicles, and for some medical equipment, respirators, or on the example here, we can see for lab equipment purchased in 2017, and we can see from the graph on the right-hand side that the value of the assets, they start to lose. The value of the depreciation is high on the first, second, and third year, and slowly on this method should be used for the, let's say, computers, medical equipment like respirators, we can use for calculators and things, those assets which we have, mainly for the equipment. Next slide, please. Another accelerated method is the double diminishing, double declining or double diminishing balance method. It's the same. For example, if we have either to use the previous one or this one, the financial experts will say it's better if you have depreciation calculated in the first and second year, so you can use the money to procure the new equipment, let's say. If you're not sure for the computer you're going to use declining balance or double declining, I will recommend double declining, because after first or second year, the computers, they lose value very quickly. So you have money for it to buy a new equipment very quickly and to renew or to replace it. So again, Fernando, what do you think is the most suitable method of both of them? What infrastructure assets or types can be used for these two methods?
Les acabamos de enviar nuevamente al chat un link para Mentimeter para que nos puedan ayudar a responder a la pregunta. So, Team, I'm seeing that the question shared is the same as the previous one.
Sorry.
No, I was saying that the question in the Mentimeter that was shared is the same as the previous one.
No, there should be a new Mentimeter. Mentimeter 5.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yes, it should be different. Mm-hmm.
Mentimeter 4.
Listo. Les agradeceríamos si pueden ayudarnos a responder en el link que compartimos a la siguiente pregunta. Si el saldo decreciente y doble decreciente son los métodos más apropiados para calcular la depreciación de qué tipos de activos de infraestructura. Según esto último que explicó Vladimir, estos dos métodos de saldo decreciente y doble decreciente son más apropiados para qué tipo, para calcular la depreciación de qué tipos de activos. Pueden responder hasta 3 preguntas y vemos algunas de las respuestas como vehículos nuevamente, computadoras, mobiliario, material médico, equipamiento, maquinaria, vehículos. So Vladimir, we're seeing some interesting responses such as vehicles again, computers, computer equipment, technological equipment. Vehicles appears to be the most common response. Furniture as well, office furniture. Again, computers, vehicles, equipment. Those are more or less the most common responses we're receiving.
I expected, yes, the computers and vehicles, they lose the value very, very quickly. And the vehicles after 5th year, they require a lot of maintenance and operation costs related to the maintenance. So that's why most of the organizations, they replace the new vehicles after 5th, 6th or 7th year. Also, for example, for the computers after 2nd, 3rd year, they should be replaced or renewed. That's why these methods are called accelerated methods for calculation of depreciation. Now we're going to see, next slide, please. Thank you very much. We're going to see another slide, number 10, I think. Yes, some of the years digits methods. Also, this is the, if you have a government purchased, most appropriate method for using vehicles or equipment with a longer period of time, let's say 7 up to 10 years. For example, like it's shown here on the slide, garbage truck, which value of 100,000. This is the most appropriate method of using, it's called sum of the years digit method. And it's explained how the formula is calculated, how we calculate sum of the years. For the first year, its sum of the years digit is 100 plus 10 divided by 2. 100 is 10. If, for example, the service life of the vehicle garbage truck is 10 years, so 10 years square, it's 100 plus 10 divided into 2, that's 55. That's the sum of the years digit. So this number we divide it, for example, for the first year, we divide 10 by 55 and we multiply by 100, and we got for the first year, book value of our garbage truck is $18,182. That's our book value, which accountants are. For the second year, it's the same thing, but dividing 9 with 55 and multiplying by 100,000, which is 16,365. Instead of using the calculator again, you should use the Excel. It's very simple, shown on on the right-hand side. So you have the input data. You can put input data, the garbage truck, put the purchase value, purchase cost, and then on the depreciation years, for example, 10, and automatically calculating the opening book value and ending book value. The accountants, they know about this. So this is, you can see on the right slide, the graph. Also similar, this is another accelerated, let's say, depreciation method we should use, especially for vehicles. And Fernando, back to you, if we can start Menti 5.
Compartiremos nuevamente una actividad de Menti. Ya saben ustedes la dinámica, pero aquí quisiéramos saber cuáles son sus respuestas a la siguiente pregunta. Este método que acaba de comentar Vladimir, la suma de los dígitos de los años, es más apropiado para calcular la depreciación de qué tipos de activos de infraestructura. El método de la suma de los dígitos de los años, ¿para qué tipos de activos es más apropiado para calcular la depreciación? Can we share some of the answers, please? El link para responder a la pregunta está aquí en el chat. Y en esta ocasión es para el método de la suma de los dígitos de los años. Vemos algunas respuestas. Nuevamente, vehículos es la respuesta con más, que más se repite, perdón. Maquinaria, edificios, computadoras. Pero parece ser que la respuesta predominante es vehículos. Se repite bastante. Camiones, por ejemplo. Quizás camiones de basura o residuos. Maquinaria, computadoras. Vehículos recolectores, por ejemplo. Maquinaria pesada. Equipo médico. Buses o autobuses, camiones. Perfecto. So Vladimir, some of the most common responses are vehicles. Trucks. Trucks appears also as a frequent response. Computers, again, equipment, but especially I'd say vehicles, trucks, computers.
That's right, yes. Most of it is for equipment like vehicles and equipment which can last for a longer period of time. But there is another, next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you, Fernando. Yeah, next slide is showing how we're going to calculate another method, the fifth one, sum of the units of production. This is explained by this example. For example, if the government in 2010 invested in a new wind farm, which cost about, it's $300 million, and with the installed capacity of this plant, it's about 210 megawatts, and estimated to produce a total of 550 gigawatts per hour, over estimated life of 20 years, 25 years. Which method we're going to use? Either we're going to use the declining balance or straight line. I will recommend for this type of assets, when we have a production of some plants or whatever, then this is the most appropriate method. Also, this method can be used, for example, for medical equipment. We know, for example, for the past records of some medical equipment, how many units have been done. For example, for the X-ray machine, how many patients have been used during the month or during the year. So we can calculate the method. It's very easy. For example, if we know the units of production, which our manufacturer will say, this maximum it can be used, for example, in this case, in 300 million, we can use about 25 years, but approximately 20 years, we can use maximum of the wind farm per year, or 20 gigawatts per year. That's a maximum or average. So we know average and we estimate and we put that input data on our calculation so we can estimate the depreciation value. In the second year, the turbines are more efficient, for example, if they increases the consumption or whatever the production of the energy, electrical energy, then the depreciation will be higher. Also, this method can be used for vehicles. So we know that vehicles for the 5 or 6 years can go from up to 150 to 200,000 kilometers, and then we monitor each year how many kilometers normally with the maintenance, regular maintenance of the vehicles, and we can estimate exact ending book value of our vehicle. So I forgot to mention about all these methods. In Excel, you have a formula, so you can easily calculate without knowing how to do it by hand or by calculator, except for the last one, some of the units of production, there is no formula. And again, the last Menti for this part, Menti number 6.
Nuevamente, al igual que en los ejemplos anteriores, lanzamos un Mentimeter en el link que en este momento pueden abrir para responder la siguiente pregunta. ¿La suma de las unidades es el método más apropiado para calcular la depreciación de qué tipo de activos de infraestructura? Y aquí, como bien mencionó Vladimir, el nombre, digamos, de producción sugiere algunas posibles respuestas. Entonces, vemos aquí, por ejemplo, vehículos, equipo médico, planta de energía, computadoras, infraestructura eléctrica, médico. So we're receiving some interesting responses, Vladimir, such as vehicles again.
Yes, again,
but also
vehicles, okay.
medical equipment. Energy, electricity, electrical plant, lab equipment, water treatment plants. Are more or less some of the responses, Vladimir.
Water treatment plants, yes. The pumps we know, for example, the capacity of the pump or some equipment of the water treatment plants. We know the maximum what can be used for, let's say, capacity of the pump. So if it's overused, we know the depreciation will be higher. If we don't use it, there will be still some depreciation, but it will be less. So before we go to the first daily break session, what depreciation method should we use from these 5 presented so far? We've got some answers, very good answers. Thank you very much. And we know that what accountants usually do, they use the straight line method. It's basic and relatively very easy to use with few unknown factors to consider. Usually only one is used in common practice, which is straight line. Straight line depreciation method, it's commonly used in most municipalities, and how it declines in value. What about the IT equipment and medical equipment? Even the accountants, in our companies or municipalities, they use the same method, even for the medical equipment, for vehicles, which is not right. When choosing between 5 methods depreciation, we should consider the nature of our infrastructure assets. It's very important. For example, we should think first about whether they become less useful at even years or rate, or even they suddenly drop in value. Similarly, we should consider whether the asset is used at regular and steady intervals, or whether it might be idle for a long time. Like I'll give you an example about the road. It has been built and it hasn't been used for, let's say, there are no buildings constructed yet, and because only the road infrastructure has been built, but still we can use the depreciation method some of the units production will be adequate. For example, we can say the road first year slowly declines, but when we start, it's gonna use of production is gonna be very extensive towards the end of the years of the life cycle. Based on the depreciation method of your choice, or the accountants, or better, or your past experience, asset management software should have functions to make different infrastructure asset depreciation entry, like drop box or combo box. So you can choose for each asset type different methods. So we recommend that don't use one method, use different methods for different types of assets. Finally, it's important whether it's necessary to use a complex methods depreciation. For more simple method, it will be enough. For a complex infrastructure, for example, bridges, what type of depreciation method we're going to use there? Or treatment plants. So now it's time to have a break. We can take a 5-minute break. Can we have a next slide? Fernando, please go ahead.
Perfecto. Bueno, esta ha sido la primera parte de esta presentación del día de hoy, pero tomaremos un breve receso de 5 minutos. Al igual que ayer, nos dividirán en grupos pequeños, pero todos tienen la opción de quedarse en el grupo para hacer contactos, presentarse, intercambiar información, etcétera. Simplemente conversar sobre la última pregunta en la diapositiva o tomarse los 5 minutos y nos vemos de regreso ahora en la plenaria en 5 minutos. Muchas gracias. Please, can we go into the breakout rooms? Perfecto. Pues bienvenidos de regreso. Bienvenidos de regreso. Ya estamos viendo que todos estamos casi de vuelta. Y bueno, antes de continuar a la segunda parte de la presentación, intentaremos responder algunas de las preguntas que hemos estado recibiendo en el chat. Hay una pregunta, Vladimir, there's one question that says, some items reappear for every method. How does that make sense?
Sorry, come again.
It says, some items reappear for every method in the Mentimeter, such as, I
Yes.
guess, such as vehicles, for example.
Vehicles, yes.
How does that make sense, or is there a reason or an...
It's true that vehicles can use any method. It's a tricky question, and the right answer is the financial expert or accountant can give you advice which the best method is. If you ask me, even I'm not the financial expert, for the vehicles, the most appropriate method is the last one, the fifth one. And most of the accountants, they use straight line, which is not really good. But most appropriate method for vehicles is the fifth one. It's sum of the units.
Thank you, Vladimir. There's another question that says, are there any international norms, accounting norms, that are related to these depreciation methods, or that somehow are a framework for these depreciation method? Are there any international accounting norms to this?
There is international accounting standards, and they have all these 5 methods in the international accounting standards. Every municipality or the government, they recommend, or regulatory system recommend for financial books to what method should be used for each asset. And that's not strict, let's say, regulation which asset should be used, but each country or each country sets the rules based on international accounting standards, that what method could be used for infrastructure assets.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
As I said before, Fernando, or dear participants and colleagues, your accountant or your financial expert can recommend you which appropriate method is used. I can recommend only for the roads, for the water supplies, straight line method. For the buildings also. For the computers, equipment that's declining, double declining balance, or let's say the other sum of years, because they are accelerated depreciation methods. For the rest, let's say vehicles and let's say wind farms or things like treatment plants could be used, and very appropriate method is this, the fifth one. So let's move forward on to the next slide. Thank you. Now we saw how the accountants are calculating the depreciation they have the so-called book value of the assets. Local governments usually keep the value of the assets in their books with data such as acquisition value or the procurement value at the beginning, and depreciation value, and net book value. Those three figures, they appear in the financial documents, profit and loss, balance sheets and income statements. And if we ask ourselves, is it a true asset valuation? Do we know the real value of the assets? It's not. Net book value does not represent a real value of the asset. So that's why sometimes it leads to calculation of the underestimated value of depreciation. That's why the asset managers should use different method. Is it important to estimate value of the asset? It is. It's very much. Yes. Why? To determine the real remaining value of the infrastructure. Remaining, not the past. We have to know the current real value and the future as asset managers. And why it's also important to assist management to more effectively maintain the assets. If we know the current situation of the assets, what is the performance and of the asset, we know how to maintain, what measures we have to use or to focus for the future to maintain the assets. But first we have to know the value. Also, it's important for decision-making of the value, either for sale or disposal. Infrastructure assets, in particular, the civil engineering type of infrastructures, such as roads, railways, water supply, sewage networks, stormwater drainage, that are operated by our municipality or public utilities. Assets require modifications to asset management valuation process. It's assumed that for local government or government authorities, asset valuation should be derived from the basis its ongoing concern. Every year should be assess the value of our asset and its continuous process by which the economic value of the infrastructure should be calculated. There are two basic methods of asset valuation, a replacement method and historic cost. We saw the historic cost, and now we're going to see the replacement cost method, which asset management is used for calculating value of our asset. What's the difference between historical and replacement cost? The two are most commonly used methods for asset valuation are historical cost, accounting book value, and replacement cost. Both of these methods use backward-looking history in their and rely on historical cost for construction, rehabilitation, and maintenance of the assets. However, this which we saw, the 5-1, they use the original procurement cost, for example, but the other cost, replacement asset cost, is using quite different. For example, historical cost of the bridge constructed 50 years ago, it was, let's say, historically it was 500,000. But when we used the other method, current replacement or replacement method, we should estimate it current replacement cost, which today could be very easily 1.5 million or 1 million, double than historical cost. Next slide, please. Let's see how to calculate. It's very simple. For me, yes. So the formula is this. It's called depreciated replacement cost, which measures a current value of the asset based on its currently replacement cost minus an allowance that captures the deterioration or depreciation in value to date. this is the difference. We saw that historical or accountants, they see the historical cost or how much is procured. The asset managers management method is using current replacement cost. And then RSL, it's remaining service life. We divide it by estimated service life of the asset. That proportion or the ratio, we multiply by the current replacement cost. How we estimated current replacement cost, which is the estimate of the replacing of the asset with moderate equivalent or similar capacity based on unit rates. So to calculate the current replacement cost of an asset, first you need to know unit rate of that asset, and that cost unit to replace that asset. That unit might be length, area, or quantity. For example, unit rate of the replacing the road, it can be, let's say, $100,000 per $100,000 per 100 meters of the road, and then we multiply, let's say, 100,000 by 10 kilometers. It's 100,000 by 1,000, and it's 1 million. Or the area, the same method, we can say unit cost for replacing the road per square meter, it's about 10 to 5,000 US dollars per square meter. And we calculate the area of the road we have to replace or to renew, and then we multiply this, this unit rate. The costs are associated also when we are calculating the current replacement cost. Costs are associated with material, plant, labor, engineering fees, administration costs, and all other costs necessary for replacement. Also, we should include the planning costs when we want to replace or renew our assets, and supervision costs where applicable. For example, if we have a construction of the building, we see the planning, design, construction, and during construction we need supervising, so that we have to include those costs also. And on the end, in some cases we have to put value added tax. So don't forget that, it's very important. The unit rate, it could be multiplied by modifier. If you see on the formula at the bottom of the slide, that's we multiply by modifier, which is initially it's 1. But in more details, if we know regarding the circumstances and condition of each asset, the value of the modifier or multiplier can be changed to reflect the cost of impact. For example, if the condition is low current, then it can be less than 1. So this is very simple formula and very used. But let's see now how current costs, current replacement costs can be estimated. There are 4 types. The first one is current marketplace. It applies where in active market there active market for that product. Typical examples are for this plant are motor vehicles, ambulances, buses, and things like that. So you can buy it from the market. So you know how much the bus wheel is currently is the price of the bus or ambulance. So we know that it's called the current market price. For example, the second one, if we want to repair or to renew our assets, if we have a broken pipe, broken section of the pipes, then we should consider and know the renewal cost. That's the cost for reconstruct or rehabilitate. It applies where a similar asset could replace with the existing asset. If we know the material of the pipe, and we know the current cost of the replacing of the same asset, so that's we're going to use that type of cost for our calculation. But here, it's very important to consider build back better principle. This is a principle when we want to replace or rehabilitate or reconstruct some assets, we have to think about not to build the same as it was before. We should use, it's called the best build back better principle, which will be better in quality towards the resilient of asset infrastructure or item. When the current replacement cost applies, when we have, it applies where the asset is being valued, would be replaced by a different asset in terms of scale. We have more or widening the road, for example, or bigger bridge or something like that. Or you have a new technology of the assets, and then we have to use this method for replacement costs. Recoverable, the fourth one, and amount or disposal value, it applies where the asset is not in use. Then we should consider recoverable costs. Those are the costs lower than our valuation method, or the financial experts, they call net present value. If the net present value of our asset for net present value is the cost of the assets in the future. If it's lower than that, then it's better to sell it. Or those are the assets like we don't use for a long time. It's applicable if there is a competitive market for it, or does a competitive market exist. It's generally used for value entire organization when you're selling the building, which you don't use any longer as a municipality, or department for it, or part of the building. Then you should think about recoverable costs. You can sell it to private companies and things like that, and you can recover some money. On the end, disposal for assets that reach the end of the value lies, and we should estimate the cost for it. For example, for the computers, we can dispose after 2 or 3 years or 5 years when we use, and then we have to estimate what's the cost of disposal, what's the cost of taking it to somebody to recycle the material of the computer. One more, which is not here on the slide, it's about divesting our assets. For example, in southern part of Europe and eastern part of Europe, we have government has many assets which they don't use for a long time, and they pay a high cost for operational and maintenance, but they don't use it. And every year they pay for maintenance and operation, which is not used. Instead of divesting it to the local government so they can use it. For example, there was an example in eastern part of Europe where the army barracks used by the army, they can be used and divested to municipalities, used by municipalities in development of their local economy, and that can be used. So this is called divestment. So give it away, we don't use it, we just spend the money for it for nothing. Somebody else can use it for other purposes. Let's say, like I give example for the army barracks, and also municipalities, if they build the new building for themselves, and the old one is not used, but that can be used for let's say non-governmental organizations or others without cost there, so they can divest it to those companies. So we have next slide. It's a breakout session. We will go into truth. Fernando, can you explain this session?
Sure, Vladimir. So, este es nuestro primer ejercicio en grupos del día de hoy. Ustedes ya conocen la dinámica, ya lo hemos hecho anteriormente, pero acabamos de copiar y pegar las instrucciones en el chat. En este momento nos dividirán en pequeños grupos y acabamos de compartir un formulario de Google, como hicimos en algunas sesiones anteriores, que en equipos, a partir de su discusión, habrá que llenar cada una de las preguntas en el formulario de Google. Y en un inicio vienen las instrucciones. Entonces, en primer lugar, hay que seleccionar una categoría de activos de infraestructura como transporte, médico, agua, educación, etcétera. Posteriormente, discutir qué método podría utilizarse para calcular el costo actual del activo que seleccionen, que puede ser, por ejemplo, el precio de mercado, el costo de renovación, el costo de reemplazo, el valor de disposición, etcétera, que es precisamente lo que Vladimir acaba de comentar. Y sobre todo, una vez discutan cuál sería el método adecuado, pensar en por qué, cuál sería la justificación para ese método y si es posible estimar, por ejemplo, el costo del activo que hayan seleccionado, cómo lo harían. Entonces, en el formulario de Google vienen las instrucciones y vienen las preguntas que hay que llenar. Entonces nos dividiremos en grupos y regresando daremos oportunidad a una o dos personas para compartir su discusión y algunas de sus respuestas. Entonces, por favor, elijan a una persona que quisieran compartir algunas de los resultados. Y bueno, nos dividiremos en grupos y ahora nos vemos en más o menos 15 minutos de regreso. Muchas gracias. Please, can we go into the rooms? Bienvenidos nuevamente de regreso a la plenaria. En este momento, me parece que ya estamos casi todos de regreso, pero en este momento daremos oportunidad a una o dos personas de comentar algo de lo que discutieron. Entonces, en ese sentido, quisiera preguntarle, si no, no pasa nada, pero quisiera preguntarle a Cristian Raúl Zúñiga del grupo 22, si quisiera compartirnos algo de su reflexión. Me parece que estaban comentando sobre cómo estimar el valor, el costo actual de una edificación hospitalaria con algunos métodos mixtos, me parece. Entonces, no sé, Cristian Raúl, si quisieras compartirnos un poquito tu reflexión. And Vladimir, I believe you will be able to listen to the response using the simultaneous interpretation.
Sure, yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
A ver, teníamos dos ideas puestas. Espero que me estén escuchando.
Yes.
Una idea es que no existe un método absoluto, ¿ya? No hay una metodología ideal, pero sí se puede llegar a un correcto valor considerando dos metodologías. Por un lado teníamos la idea de mercado para poder valorar, y por otro lado teníamos la idea de reposición para poder reconstruir o llevar en un momento al costo de producción del metro cuadrado que significaría el edificio. Estas dos ideas nos debieran dar una idea razonable respecto del valor ideal de nuestro edificio, más que nada. No dejamos fuera todo lo que es infraestructura y equipamiento, solamente consideramos terreno y edificio. El valor del mercado por un...
Cristian, me parece que perdimos tu audio. Vladimir, are you able to hear Christian?
Yeah, no. I'm listening the translator, interpreter, but I pick up something at the beginning and then...
So I think we lost Christian, but I don't know if you would like to maybe...
Yeah, comment. The Christian, thank you very much. I heard only the first part, which is quite true. I mean, there is no ideal method for calculating the real value of the asset. That we agree totally. The first five, which we saw before, it is how the accountants calculate that the value, the book value. But to get the real value, the accountants, they're accounting based on historical costs. Or, for example, 3 or 5 years ago, what was the procurement cost or construction cost of the building, which is not the same of the current replacement cost. So if we want to renew or to rebuild the building or hospital building, as Christian says, then we should take the current replacement cost or renewal replacement cost of the hospital. Let's say we paid 10 years ago for construction of the hospital, let's say 10 million. Today, to replace or to rehabilitate or reconstruct the replacement cost or the cost should be estimated as the current cost for replacement. Let's say if it was 10 million before, today it could be, let's say, 20, 30 million. That we have to estimate based on what it estimates by engineers and things like how much it will cost. And then we can see, yes, our previous hospital was, let's say, 10 years in use and should be, let's say, we should use it for 50 years, which means 1/5, multiplied by current replacement cost, which is 50 divided by 5, which is 10 million. We have to put 10 million to replace or to renew. It's too early. So which means it's the same, we're going to have the same value as before. That's the method how we calculate the current cost of the hospital, not the historical what we bought 10 years ago. I didn't hear about the equipment. Equipment, we can use the accounting method because they lose the value very, very quickly. Let's say 3 years, 5 years. And their performance and their condition, they deteriorate very quickly. They are worn out, as I say very often, and the value of it is very low. So then we can use the accounting method, or maybe the same as asset managers should use. Let's say we have equipment, let's say computer today, which costs let's say euros or dollars, and we bought our computer 3 years ago for $600. We don't use that. We use this one 1,000. So that's the difference.
Great. Thank you very much, Vladimir. Muchas gracias, Cristian, por compartirnos la discusión de tu grupo. Mil gracias y seguiremos adelante con la presentación. Please, Vladimir, go ahead.
Thank you. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. Now we saw the valuation of our assets, and usually the municipalities or the local government valuation of assets is not mandatory on the end of every financial year. Once they establish, it can last, the same method can be used for the next 3 or 5 years. And without going on site, checking the condition and performance of the value, so we can see how our assets is aging, and then can we determine the real value. Now we are talking about asset revaluation. I mean, why, when, and who has to do it, and why revaluation? Once we evaluate it, now everybody will ask me, or I'm asking you also, why do we have to revaluate? Because to define the asset true value after we have the last valuation, which was 2 or 3 years ago. So once we reevaluated, the infrastructure asset register should be updated, our database. When to reevaluate? This is very important question. We don't have to do every single year. It has to be done, and this is the recommendations from most of the evaluators and auditors. It should be done at least 3 to 5 years, especially for our municipal land, which we use, or buildings. So that should be done in every 3 to 5 years. It's mandatory. It's not mandatory at every year, fiscal year, to do that, and it's not also not contained in any mandatory rule by international accounting standards. So who should do who should be authorized to perform revaluation? According to the international accounting standards, the revaluation of land and real estate is done by certified appraisers or evaluators, or court expert witnesses, respectively. In the process of valuation of municipal infrastructure assets, properties, plant or equipment, there is no such standard applied. Valuation assessment at municipalities may be conducted by any competent team of professionals familiar with the assets, their municipal function, with sufficient technical, organizational, or economic knowledge or financial knowledge. So those can be internal teams or external teams. We can hire external teams. We need these evaluators to check our valuation. It's very important. So what they check? They check documentation. They go on site. They take photos of the current condition, and they estimate the current value, revaluated value of our asset. So in that, when we have the reports from evaluators, when they reevaluate our assets in every 3 or 5 years, let's say 5 years, then we are sure that we have a real value of our assets. Usually, the evaluator should have all documentation in their disposal, both legal, technical, with respect of their significance for the evaluation assessment. We should provide them all the documents that they need. In such a case within the municipality organization, then we can outsource or contract them. So there is more job for us. I mean, yeah, we have done so many evaluations of the assets before. Now, let's see the example. What can happen if we don't do, let's say, re-evaluation for the period of 10 years? In this graph on the slide, next slide, please. Sorry, I'm sorry. Thank you. On the next slide, you can see the example. What will happen if we don't evaluate or reevaluate the asset for the long period of time of 10 years? And for example, if we have the pump station constructed, let's say in 2002, as you can see on the slide there, which is the first year, with construction value of 120,000, the residual value and with residual value on the years after 25 years is 10,000, as you can see on the slide. Today, you can see that the red line, remaining estimated life of the value should be 14 years, with the current value of 57,200. That's how the asset managers or the accountants, they value the value of the pump station. And that method was calculated by a straight line. This year, for example, our municipal team go on site and assess that the pump station is in poor condition with, let's say, 40% of the remaining service life, which means instead of 14 years, remaining service life should be 10. It's going to be reduced. And that automatically if we calculate it by straight line method, it's going to be 55,810. So are we sure about this value? No. Of our pump station? No. Then, because we been a long time, then we're going to call the experts. And they go on site, they check the documents and our pump station condition. They estimate that it's very poor condition and remaining service life, instead of 10 years, they have reduced it further for 10%, which means 8 years. So which means that we have only 8 years remaining that can that pump station be in service. So if we have that estimation, then they estimated uses that replacement cost, then how much the new pump station will cost. Remaining service life is 8 divided by 25 and multiplied by 120. They are coming up with 38,400. So why to bother? What's the difference? Sorry. So it's very, very important, because can you see the dotted line here on the slide? That's if we calculate it by straight line without valuation or evaluation, and we go on just the accountants, they use the formula, and this is it. And once after 10 years, somebody goes on site and checks the current condition and performance, they can reduce part. Revaluation, it's even lower, so the value of our assets is very low. So what the impact it will be for our organization, for municipality? Remember, depreciation, calculation of depreciation is part of the tariffs or taxes which we calculated to recover our expenses, or it depends on our revenue. So if we estimate it very high, let's say, but the depreciation is it's much higher, then the revenue which we receive in our organization, in municipality, it won't be enough for future maintenance or replacement cost. So that's why we should be very careful when we reevaluate and then how we reevaluate our values, because it's going to have a huge impact on our revenues and future operation of our organization. Next slide, please. Another problem which we have during the valuation of the assets, when we have two options, if we have one asset, either to renew or to replace. There are two, we are forced to make a decision or asked to provide information. Is it better to renew or to replace the assets during our service life? So that's one of the most challenging tasks for us. For example, if we have, in general, effective asset management and decision making in relation to the current cost of our existing assets, renewal valuation should be used for determination of appropriate maintenance and determination of the true depreciation of our existing assets. When we choose to replace our assets, on the other hand, it's this valuation can be used to determine the relationship between our existing asset to what standard it's our asset or what level of service it's providing. Then we should decide either we're going to replace it or renew it. And also we're going to, this is when we decide, before we decide to replace, we should ask ourselves what the future service demand will be. So if it's increased, then we have to go to replacement method. Quite often will be a situation, is there a variety of options to recommend to the decision-making managers or top managers there. So we have to provide them with information. They're going to ask us very quickly, so what's your opinion, what's your information, either to renew or to replace? If we have the existing road with carriageway of, let's say, 5.5 meters wide, and has the old condition history and construction. It was constructed long ago, let's say 20 years ago. And the subgrade, which is the layer of the road below the asphalt, it is 150 millimeters as the base course. Cost of complete reconstruction from today, if you can see on the slide where the 20-year period is, and if we go back to the yellow line, then we're going to see that the remaining estimated service life is 5 years. And then we're going to see that it was estimated 1.5 million from this yellow line. And you can see on the red lines there that depreciation value is smaller for renewal than for replacement valuation. If we decide to replace the road with wider carriageway from 5.5 to 7 meters and plus 2 meter shoulders, which are made of sand seen on the roads on either side, and with bigger upgrades so it can last longer, for example, 35 years, but the new cost, it could be even double. So what shall we do? We have two options to consider. Either bigger depreciation value, but we have more money to spend, then we have to be careful about that. That will be determining, because we have to go and borrow the money for the repayment of the loan. It will be higher than for the renewal. So those are the options we have to consider, and we have to provide information to our top managers, which is the best option, but we need more data or information so we can have the final decision on it. We can go to the Mentimeter 7 slide now. There are 2 slides there. For the first slide on the Mentimeter, can we open the Mentimeter, please? Thank you. Can you, on a picture there on the Mentimeter, you will remember the line, the first line. I would like to ask you if you can estimate what is the current cost. Great. Okay. Yes. So you should estimate the current cost of the road using that replacement or renewal formula, which we saw before. Fernando, can you go ahead? So we can see the results. We can see the results. Can you press este?
Les agradeceremos nos ayuden a responder a la pregunta: ¿cuál es el valor actual de la carretera? En función de la siguiente manera: estimación de la línea de depreciación. Era la línea amarilla en la gráfica que vimos, utilizando la fórmula vida útil remanente entre vida útil estimada por la valoración de renovación. Entonces, estamos ya recibiendo algunas respuestas. Vemos aquí, por ejemplo, que la gran mayoría sugiere que el valor actual de la carretera sería de 300,000. Es la gran mayoría de las respuestas, las dos muy por debajo. Entonces, quienes han participado creen que el valor actual de la carretera, según la fórmula que se muestra en la pregunta, vida útil remanente entre vida útil estimada por la valoración de la renovación, es de 300,000. So, Vladimir, I think the results are pretty evident. I think most...
Yes, those who answer 300,000, that's right. The others probably, they choose the value looking on the graph, and then they were not sure, but it says, yeah, it's somewhere there between 330, 350, here we are. But those who estimated correctly, which is 25 years of the useful life of the assets minus 20, it's 25. So that if we divide it 1.5 million, okay, divided by 25 divided by 50, oh, sorry, 5 divided by 25, which is 1.5 million divided by 5, which is exactly 300,000. So those who answered 300,000, they have done great. So most of you use the correct formula. Now the second slide, please. The question is, we know the depreciation value from the replacement and renewal, and we know that the cost for it. What other key factors do you need to determine either going to renew or replace the asset? Thank you. Fernando.
Igualmente, les agradeceremos nos ayuden a responder a esta pregunta. ¿Cuáles son otros factores determinantes para la valoración? Y se muestran dos opciones. El costo de renovación de 1.5 millones estimado con una vida útil de 25 años, o el costo de reemplazo de 2.8 millones con una vida útil estimada de 35 años. Entonces la diferencia es costo de renovación y costo de reemplazo, y la vida útil también. Entonces les agradeceremos nos ayuden a responder. Aquí vemos intensidad de uso como un factor, costo de renovación, vida útil, calidad, depreciación, vida útil. La gran mayoría cree que es la opción 1, intensidad de uso, costo. So Vladimir, some of the responses.
Yes, option 1, somebody will say it's more favorable because of the smaller depreciation value, and determining factor probably for them was the money. They have to be invested and to renew the or to replace, because it's double. But the major key factor is not of all these options is not only what appropriate depreciation or the money needs for it to be spent, but the other factor is the other factor which we have to consider is what is the demand. Okay, what's the traffic on that road? What's the service required by the customers? For example, 20 years ago, we have number of vehicles using that road. Today, probably it's doubled or tripled. And if we renew, it will be the same road, but it won't provide the service. So that's why probably another information or calculation we have to do, it's called cost-benefit analysis, which I won't discuss about that, should be determined to be performed to determine the final decision we have to make and to present that information to the decision making and say, this is the reason we have to replace or to renew. Thank you very much for everybody answering these questions. Thank you very much. We go to the next slide now. Knowing the asset value, depreciation and everything, now we should do the analysis of critical assets. The main reason for condition assessment is to determine the asset capacity to perform the required level of service, which is resulting in performance of our asset system. So assessment is the best way of infrastructure asset maintenance is the most difficult task for municipality, especially having in mind the requirements for the cost reduction imposed by the founder, or the money we spend for it on one side and the customer demands on the other side. So together, the founder or the investor demands to decrease the service of level, because our municipality, and to reduce taxes on the other, which is from the customer side. So it's very important to have what type of maintenance in order to select what are the most critical assets are, what type of maintenance is needed, what type of control and inspection, renovation or replacement of the assets we saw, and when we should do it. And in good government practice is how it should be determined the best combination of costs and risk. So we have to assess the cost and risk of the critical assets and performances of the assets in relation with this intervention that should be undertaken. Next slide, please. Thank you. Oh, we're coming back to virtual break of 5 minutes. So, Fernando, back to you.
Bueno, en este momento tendremos otro pequeño receso de 5 minutos. Los invitamos a participar en los grupos pequeños para que puedan conocerse, presentarse, intercambiar datos de contacto, etcétera, o simplemente conversar sobre, por ejemplo, la última pregunta. Pero bueno, nos vemos en 5 minutos. Los invitamos a discutir en los grupos o a tomarse los 5 minutos de receso. Y ahora nos vemos en 5 minutos. Gracias. Please, can we go into the rooms? Bienvenidos de regreso a la plenaria. Me parece que ya casi estamos todos de regreso. Estoy viendo que ya prácticamente todos estamos ya de nueva cuenta aquí. Entonces continuamos con la presentación. Please, Vladimir.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you. We saw that we just briefly talked about critical assets, how we select the critical assets. And now we're going to discuss about risk or risky assets together with critical assets. And what is the terminology of risks? What is risk? Risk is the effect of uncertainty of the objectives. For example, we have business risk to local government organization is usually defined as a minor or major uncertainty in relation to anticipated outcome of the business activity. For example, if we have one asset that has a certain condition of the asset, physical condition, deteriorated over time, then the risk exposure is higher. And we say this is critical asset and it's high risk for future performance of our asset. And that can have a certain consequences. To assess business results, leverage method is used to so-called fixed factors, fixed by cost and respectively to business to municipal expenses. It can be financial cost as a consequence. It can be a level of service and financial, let's say, costs leverage, and which means that we have to repair more or replace the asset. That's why we have to mitigate the risk. Therefore, the business risk must be defined as uncertainty related to anticipated business or also in municipal revenues. More on estimation on assessment on risk assessment, we're going to hear on next session on climate change risks during the next session of online solution dialogue, which is the other consultant or lead author, Dustin. Now it can be concluded that failure of risk assessment in infrastructure assets can be undertaken only after evaluation of the condition of the infrastructure asset and required level of maintenance, investment in infrastructure assets that are respectively completed. The aim of these activities should be determined by probability of failure of the asset. The question is always we have, if the asset fail to perform or it's broken down, what the consequences will be. Then if we have high risks or we have a high list of critical assets, then we have to prioritize this asset either for increased maintenance or to replace or to renew. Next slide, please. Risk assessment, how it can be done. Can we avoid? Can we eliminate risk? No, but we can only manage the risk. So how we can manage? We have to know how old is an asset. We have to check the history, when was built, how it has been performed, what is the asset condition. We have to estimate the condition of the assets. What is the asset failure history? How many times in the past this pump, or let's say electrical installation failed to perform, and we have consequences of it, and how it's likely to fail. What's the probability of fail? We have to, that's the assessment or analysis we have to do. Then we have to ask and put the sentences or the statements, what are the consequences if our asset fail? Is it going to have the impact on public health and safety? Are we going to have decreased level of service? Is our municipality organization going to suffer from huge financial, medium or low financial losses? Is it going to have an impact on environment? What consequences that can be? And what perception in that case we're going to have from our customers as a utility or the organization or municipality. And then we have to assess how much it will cost to repair in order to mitigate the asset, to mitigate the risks. Next slide, please. Thank you. It's usually there is an opposite relationship. If we have higher asset level of services, higher, and we have a high providing of level of services, then we have a lower risks and probability. That's because if we reduce our maintenance cost, then we are lowering asset level of services, and then we are exposed with higher risk of level of services, increased risk probability that can happen in a near future. For example, in that graph is shown when is the optimal, then we mitigate the risks and put the money or increase the maintenance or replace or renew the asset. For example, on this graph on the right side, if we have with the red line, risk exposure, it's increasing towards time because the assets they have they deteriorated, the depreciation, accumulated depreciation is higher, then we have the lower value of our assets, the condition is reduced drastically over time, and exposure of the risk is higher, then we need a lot of money to mitigate on the end of the asset life to mitigate that risk. And on the other hand, at the beginning we have a high, let's say, with the blue line we have a high level of services because and towards the end we have reduced level of services because of the low maintenance. So usually we ask ourselves, what is the optimal level when we determine when is the real risk asset, so we can intervene in replacement or renewal of the asset. The optimal, if we over the years, you can see this green line is not where the minimum is, it's just before that. So we can invest or put the money, estimate how much cost it will be to mitigate all this risk. Then we will have a greatest impact. Not before, because we're gonna estimate a lot of money, but if we estimate too late, then it's gonna cost us even more than that. Next slide. How the risk is measured or calculated? It's very simple formula, which is risk calculation formula. We have business risk exposure, business running cost, that's equal by failure of consequences. We measure, for example, from 1 to 5 or 1 to 20. And what is the consequences of it? And when we have a failure or that our asset doesn't perform, desired service level of service. And that is multiplied by failure probability or likelihood, somebody says. This probability of failure depends on the age of the asset. For example, if it's toward the end of the service life, the failure of probability is much higher. Also, the condition. If the condition deteriorates very quickly, even if it's, let's say, in the middle of the service life, then the condition probability of failure, it can be even higher. Reliable assets also, capacity of it, and external hazards. As I said, natural hazards or man-made hazards or hazards done by wrong design of our assets. So all these factors, they should be used to determine the risk measures. And it's simple formula by calculating these two risk results or estimation. Next slide, please. Excuse me. How the risk is estimated? It's using the, probably have seen so many times these metrics, risk assessment matrix, and two components, input components are estimation of consequences and likelihood or probability of failure. For probability of failure, the input data is a condition, a depreciation or degradation condition of the performance of the asset, the regular inspection of the assets, which means what the maintenance was before, historical maintenance, operation cost, are they have been increased? If they increase, that there is a sign for us, then that's something that our assets are deteriorating slowly, and this is increasing the likelihood or probability of failure. Also, it's disaster when we have to see the external factors like natural climate change and technical failure. On the other hand, the consequences can be health, safety, level of services, natural from environment impacts, what the consequences will be. And we put the grades from 1 to 5, both on likelihood or consequences. When we have in this red area here, we're going to see the critical assets which are there, or risk assets, risk ratings. Based on these two factors, we're going to list the priority of assets. We have to determine what we should do. If it's on the yellow area or on the green area, then we have to ask ourselves how to maintain how to perform future maintenance of the assets, how much money we should allocate for the maintenance. If it's in green, we have to do nothing, then it's okay. And we should say continue with the maintenance. If it's in the yellow or orange or on the then we have to ask what intensive maintenance activities should we do. Probably if they are nearly the high risk or high risk or critical assets, then we have to think about renewal or replacement of the assets, how we determined earlier on. And also how to design, what measures should be incorporated into the designs or during the construction. We've discussed about either build back better principle, which is quite common use. It's not only for replacement, but some measures should be incorporated into design in order to achieve sustainability of our assets, which means it can be on customer service, environment, organization, failures, inspection, or disasters. These are the outputs which we have. If we think about all these factors, or how we maintain, how we replace, what design measures should we do, and how it could be constructed in order to achieve the sustainability. Thank you. Next slide. If we know the risks now, we we prioritize risks. Now the question is, how are we gonna treat the risk? There are 5 options of risk reduction strategy. We can make a strategy how we're gonna reduce the risk. There is a risk acceptance, do nothing. If it's on a green zone, for example, if it's low risk or asset is not critical, doing nothing, it's okay. But if it's, let's say, in medium or towards the high risk area, if it's scoring 3 or 4, 3 times 3, or whatever the scoring should be, then doing nothing is not always the option. We should think about maintenance. How we have to improve our maintenance activities or not, or how much it will cost us. Risk avoidance is unrealistic service objectives. Then maybe we have put our objectives indicators too high, so then we have to recheck. And for example, there is no flooding during the intensive rains. For example, we thought it's gonna be intensive rains in the next period, but when we checked, these objectives or parameters or indicators are not really realistic. This is also not an option. We have to go further. We have to accept and mitigate risk always, either through the insurance. Our municipal infrastructure must be insured and should be insured in case of failure of our assets or other external exposure of the hazards. And then increased level of service with increased maintenance, which is mitigation measures, and we have to estimate how much cost it will be needed for increased maintenance for the next period of time. Or risk elimination, it's renewal or replacement. Then we eliminate the risk by renewal or replace the assets with the new ones. Thank you. Next slide. I'm going to show you now one of the projects which we've done here in the small, one of many in the region. For example, we have the bridge on the river, which was periodically flooded. You can see the top right top picture there, which is simulation of the floods. You can see with the blue color there. Periodically, on one town there is a bridge in the middle there, on this curve of the river, which was flooded constantly, and there is a big risk of that bridge to collapse. So there were few options what to do, how to mitigate, either to regulate the river first or to build a bridge first. And we decided to, we've done the simulation, and from many simulations of the used by, let's say, software, and then we decided to build as a first option. You can see on the left, first option just to build the bridge, and then regulate the portion of the river from beginning to end, and which is we are eliminating, even we have the low risks now, and the traffic is going perfectly for the past, let's say, 5 or 6 years since I've been on site several times, and it's performing excellent. Thank you. Next slide. Now we're gonna break up again group. The next slide, to assess, to see what are the key challenges during prioritizing critical infrastructure assets. What is your experience when what difficulties do you have? What issues do you have? Is it a lack of data, or is it different decision making from the teams, or what are the key challenges when you prioritize your critical or risk assets? Thank you, Fernando. Back to you. Sorry.
Bueno, en este momento nos dividiremos en grupos pequeños, como hemos hecho en las otras ocasiones. Compartimos las instrucciones en el chat, al igual que el formulario de Google, para que puedan elegir a una persona que nos ayude a responder las siguientes preguntas que se muestran en el formulario, que aquí tiene que ver principalmente con identificar los desafíos para evaluar el estado de los activos, el desempeño de los activos y sobre todo los principales desafíos para evaluar los riesgos de los activos. Y al finalizar el cuestionario viene una pregunta también con algunas recomendaciones. Si pueden elaborar algunas recomendaciones para mejorar la evaluación de los activos críticos y que puedan estar en situación de riesgo. Entonces, bueno, nos dividiremos, es la misma dinámica. Ahí viene resumida la actividad y las preguntas. Entonces, nos vemos ahora para pedirle a una o dos personas que nos compartan sus comentarios, por favor. Please, can we split up into the rooms? Bienvenidos de regreso a la plenaria. Estoy viendo que ya estamos regresando a la plenaria. Vamos a dar un minuto para que regresemos todos al grupo amplio. Perfecto, pues muchas gracias por su discusión en los grupos. En esta ocasión quisiéramos dar oportunidad a una persona de compartir algo de su reflexión, ya sea sobre los desafíos para evaluar el estado de los activos o para evaluar el desempeño de los activos o desafíos para evaluar los riesgos del activo que hayan seleccionado. Entonces, quizás quisiera pedirle a Claudia Rivas si nos pudiera compartir brevemente alguna de sus reflexiones sobre los desafíos para evaluar estado de activos, desempeño o riesgos de activos. Claudia, ¿estás por ahí?
Sí, por acá estoy, Fernando. No sé si me ven.
Te escuchamos perfectamente.
Sí, ok. Bueno, con relación a los principales desafíos, nosotros comentábamos que muchas veces es la falta y la veracidad de la información, ya que pues en algunas ocasiones nos hemos estado en situaciones donde hay diversas fuentes de información. Entonces, muchas veces no está actualizada, en algunas otras veces el problema está en cuál vamos a tomar como fuente oficial. ¿Quién va a decidir cuál es la información que va a ser, pues en este caso, fiable para tomar una decisión inmediata, ¿verdad? Máxime si es en el caso de un desastre natural. Entonces, muchas veces no se comparte también la información y eso al final en una toma de decisión máxime ante un desastre natural es de mucha relevancia, ya que pues resulta un poco como que difícil establecer qué ruta se va a tomar, qué actividades se van a ejercer o qué plan se va a tomar debido a esa situación. Eso fue lo que reflexionamos pues en relación a los desafíos durante la evaluación.
Perfecto, Claudia. Muchísimas gracias por la respuesta. I don't know, Vladimir, if you would like to, if you have any reaction. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Claudia. Very, very interesting. Yes, it happens also in the southern part of Europe, or not only in Europe, everywhere. It's difficult to estimate what the hazards and disasters can happen due to the climate change or any other hazards. The role of municipality is not to estimate that, but the information can be gathered from various institutions like crisis management team within the national crisis management team, or let's say a crisis management within the municipality. So it's their responsibility. They can give you the information about on-time information when the disaster can strike. For example, floods. If we have the measurements of the river, of the meteorological and plus the information about the river, then we can have an early warning system which can help us to predict what the hazards can be. Also, we can check the historical records of the while designing or decision for replacement or renewal of the assets. Get the historical information about the weather, the flows of the river, and things like that, so we can analyze them and put them into the risk metrics. So, for example, for the bridges, for important assets, there we have to be very careful and engage the the experts who can do the analysis and simulation, like you have seen similar on a computer few slides before. Thank you very much. Now we're gonna continue with the next slide and the next session, which is once we have determined the cost of the value, what's the value of our asset, what are the critical assets, what are the risky assets, how much money we have to allocate for, let's say, replacement or renewal of the critical assets, and the maintenance is going to be with the intensive maintenance. We have to allocate mitigation measures for future maintenance. So we have to do financial plan. It can be short and long-term asset management plans. We call that asset management plan. We have to give the information to the decision-making directors or the other from the mayor, what we should do. So the plan which asset managers are producing, full plan, financial plan, having in mind all the information from before, when and how much money should we allocate for replacing or renewal or mitigating the risks on the priority assets. Then it's a full plan that we as asset management team or asset manager should produce and give the information to asset managements, to the mayors and other decision-making bodies that they should make a decision what we should do. But then we have a feedback information from the financial plan or from the mayors, considering two aspects. Is it feasible? Do we have enough funds to do that? Can we sustain? Is it our municipality can borrow that amount of money if we ask for a lot of, let's say, replacement funds or funds for renewal? Then there is another capital, it's called capital financial plan. We call it what we can do. So we compare these two plans and what we should do and what we can do. Asset management plan, financial plan minimizes the asset life cycle costs. When we compare what we should do and what we can do, then we go back and forth, not jeopardizing the level of service of the assets or the condition of performance of the assets or exposure to risks to our future assets. Thank you. Next slide. So when we do asset management capital financial plans, we should ask ourselves, it guides us to scheduling of maintenance, refurbishment or renewal, replacement. But the major question is, when is optimal to replace to do in the future? So when we know the current cost of our asset, what will be the optimal level for replacement or renewal of our assets? Which year? If we have, for example, on the graph, year 2021, we can see with the red line, the depreciation, future depreciation of our assets. That's usually it's calculated by net present value. I don't want to go in detail how it's calculated. It's calculated by using estimating the inflation in the future, using discount rate. So we have a present value of the asset, then we can easily calculate it using discount rate formula for estimating the future value of the depreciation. So you can see that red line going down for the next 10 years. And on the other hand, our operation and maintenance costs during the time, they have increased, they will be increased definitely. And how can we calculate it? The same method, but in the opposite way. We have to predict, to estimate and calculate what the operation and maintenance cost will be for this asset or group of assets or service on the service level, let's say on the category level, for this group of assets for the next period of time. For sure, they're going to increase if we don't do nothing because the depreciation will go down. Now, if we add these two values for this year, we're going to see this green line. And it's similar like on similar like estimation the optimal level of when is the biggest impact of mitigating the risk, which period. This is the same logical here, but and then on the green line, if we say the optimal level is in the 2026, like it's shown on the graph there, and we propose to invest for replacement between 2021 and 2023 for those assets which are not critical, then we're going to spend a lot of money. It's too early. Don't do that. And then for the next period, the optimal level is where the minimum, but before and after. After this period, optimal level, it's too late. Our organization and municipality is going to have a very difficulties if we don't replace or renew our assets after this optimal time. It's going to be very difficult to recuperate all the cost and loss of revenues. Next slide, please. Thank you. Then on the end, we produce, let's say, asset renewal replacement, which is optimal. This table on the top, you can see from the years from 1 to 10. Then we estimate the cost for replacements and operation and maintenance, which you can see on the left-hand side from the graph there from the short period of time, which are the bars for the renewal, replacement, or with the cost allocated for operation and maintenance cost. As you can notice here, this gives us some indication that our assets will quickly deteriorate after 5 or 10 years, this graphic shows. So instead of that, definitely the mayors or the others, they will go back and say, why can't we equalize? So because we're going to have a lot of borrowings, additional borrowings needed to cover all these investments needed for replacement. Or we can reduce the scope for renewal or replacement. Instead of fully rehabilitation, we can say for the first period of time, we can reduce the cost for renewal or replacement. This is back and forth. It's not cast in the concrete. These plans are going back and forth for the period of time until you have the equal balance. We will see later on. There are the key indicators when we have the balanced plan, financial, what we should do and what we can do internally, which is internal generated funds from the revenues which the municipality has. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. We're going to have another 5 minutes break.
So Vladimir, we're skipping the break and we're going directly into the KPIs.
Excellent.
So please go ahead.
Sure. Now we're going to discuss about key performance indicators, why do we need, and what we have to do. Next slide, please. Why we need the key performance indicators? We have to monitor and evaluate our asset management action plan, effectiveness, and sustainability. We saw yesterday that we have a database with a lot of data in our data registry. We are providing this information to the decision making for their decision, and they can then when decided, it can be included in our asset management strategy or asset management plan as a capital growth or capital renewal or operation and maintenance plan, all connected to our financial statements or plans. And on the end, these indicators will measure our performance and delivery of the plans. And those indicators are very valuable for setting the targets against various plans or decision making. Next slide, thanks. Now I'm going to show you the composite indicators. They're called composite indicators. When we have different indicators can be used for infrastructure development, which compare local, provincial, country infrastructure performance in policy analysis and public communication. Excuse me. In general terms, an indicator is quantitative or qualitative measure derived from a series of data that can reveal relative positive positions or negative level in a given community or municipality. For example, we have a lot of indicators or pillars to measure municipal development in English, all connected to the infrastructure. Infrastructure systems, they have impact on achieving up to 92% of sustainable development goals. So if we have to consider all these notified indicators to measure our municipal development index, in infrastructure, economy, health, education infrastructure, social infrastructure, culture infrastructure, and so on and so on. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to show you some composite indicator sample. When we are defining the indicators, we have to define the name of the indicator. For example, on this slide is shown roads, paved roads in our municipality, which is percentage of the total length or area of the roads. Then we have to define very clearly the indicator definition, what we measure, how we measure it. Method of measurement is something, but we have to define indication about the condition of the assets and how this and when it will be measured. We have to explain the method of measurement. Is the calculation based on length of the roads, like we said, divided by total length of the roads as example of municipality, and as a result to give as a percentage or sometimes in kilometers and things like that. Now, the very important is where this data we're going to get it from, either from our database, which we have done, or statistical office, national, municipality, government, or public enterprises, or utilities which are serving, let's say, water utilities and things like that, to measure, or road public utility for maintenance the roads. Now we're going to go to breakout room again for number 3 and we should discuss how to create smart, measurable indicators. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. Acabamos de compartir en el chat las instrucciones para... Acabamos de compartir en el chat las instrucciones para el grupo, para el ejercicio en grupo, es el tercero y último, y en esta ocasión hay que llenar el formulario en relación con los indicadores y se hacen 3 preguntas muy claras, que es seleccionar una categoría de activos de infraestructura, como en los ejemplos anteriores, y después identificar un indicador para ese activo. Entonces hay que escribir la definición del indicador, el método que podría utilizarse para medir ese indicador y posibles fuentes de información para poder calcular ese indicador. Entonces, por favor, nos dividiremos en grupos, les pedimos que completen el formulario y nos vemos de regreso en unos minutos para compartir 1 o 2 reflexiones. Ahora nos vemos. Please, can we go into the rooms? Bienvenidos de regreso. Muchas gracias por su participación en esta discusión sobre indicadores. Estamos, me parece, ya casi todos de regreso en el grupo. Entonces, daremos la palabra a una persona para que nos pueda compartir algo de su discusión sobre qué tipo de activos seleccionaron y qué indicador, cómo definen el indicador o cómo se pudiera medir o con qué fuentes de información. Entonces, entiendo que ya estamos de regreso. Entonces, no sé si Yolanda Alberto Hernández, si nos pudiera compartir un poquito su discusión. Yolanda, ¿estás por ahí? No sé si Yolanda está por ahí. Yolanda Alberto Hernández.
Hola, sí, lo que pasa es que no me dejaba quitarme el mute.
No te preocupes. Adelante, Yolanda. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, en el grupo 10 estuvimos trabajando con el tema del agua. Entonces, escogimos el agua como el activo de infraestructura local y pensamos que el indicador, dentro de varios indicadores que se pueden utilizar, podía ser la demanda en metros cúbicos para poder definir, digamos, cómo está funcionando ese servicio. Y hay varias maneras de hacer una medición de este indicador. Comentábamos porque había integrantes de Uruguay, había integrantes de Ecuador y también yo que estoy de Chile. Y estábamos trabajando con el tema de la medición. Hay bastantes formas de medirlo, pero resaltamos la macromedición y los sistemas domiciliarios a través, por supuesto, ya sea de la instrumentación que generan las empresas que manejan el agua potable, o también se puede hacer a través de la medición manual. Y estos registros siempre se dejan de alguna manera a través de agencias locales disponibles para el público. Y también platicamos mucho que esto es fácil de acceder con el tema de la ley de transparencia, que en nuestros países está disponible para poder revisar esta información.
Muchísimas gracias, Yolanda, por la respuesta tan completa también. Mil gracias. I don't know, Vladimir, if you would like to briefly react to Yolanda's. Please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Fernando. Thanks, Yolanda. Very interesting. Probably you were talking about non-revenue water, how much the losses of the water you have in the municipality, that's the huge impact on a revenue of the municipality, especially of the utilities when they provide services for water supply services. Also, probably you have discussed very interesting subject. I'm a little bit expert for it. It's about consumption per capita, per person. Here in Europe, on the World Bank, they have established the indicator between 90 liters per person per day, which is the consumption needed for person, up to, let's say, 120. And it's very difficult to implement and to meet those requirements. But on the other hand, in the developing countries, if you can see the consumption of water, it's quite high. It's 250 liters per person per day, 300 for liters per. Well, that's probably that's demand or whatever, and depends on the rural areas. The rural areas, they require more water. I mean, for watering gardens and things like that. And they have different needs in the rural areas than in urban areas. So there is that discrepancy, and very difficult to set the indicator. Also, I can discuss this all day, but we can go on now. Thank you very much, Yolanda. Thank you very much, Fernando, for this. Now we can go on to the next slide, which will we have seen these indicators which are measuring our municipal development index. Now we're going to discuss about three major indicators, performance indicators and that have been identified to enable the local governments to make local governments to more readily measure and report overall asset management sustainability. First of all, first indicator is called asset consumption rate ratio, which is can show us and highlights the capital investments required for future to preserve. We, as municipality, we have to preserve for future asset service life in terms of replacement costs and what we have current replacement costs. So these ratios between 50 and 75 are taken from public, these limits of the ratios, which are quite high because they are taken from Institute of Public Works of Engineering in Australia. And these ratios are outlined in the Australian Infrastructure Financial Management Guidelines and for the local governments. And for the developing countries, they can be, let's say, from 60 to 80, which these are quite high, which means that we have to reserve at least 50 to 75% of depreciation value for the current replacement of the assets. That's which means at the age of 50%, let's say if the asset is 10 years old, from, let's say, from 5 to 6, we have to preserve this amounted accumulated depreciation. We have to, let's say, cover at least 50 or 75, which are quite high. Next slide, please. But for the developing countries, as I said, it should be okay, about 60 to 80%, even 90%. This is quite enough. The other one is asset sustainability ratio, which measures or give us the indication to what extent and which assets are being replaced as they reach the end of the service lives. For example, how much capital expenditure for replacement is needed for your local assets divided by depreciation expense. This is okay. Then the range should be between 90 to 100%, 110%, which means if it's more than 100 or 110, as I said, this is for Australia, then the local government may be over-investing in renewal or replacement. This, the ratio is quite useful. Previous one, if the previous one is tuned in that range between 60 and 80, and this between 80 and 90, we will be quite sure that, next slide, please. We will have successful indicator. This will show which we are calling asset renewal funding ratio, which indicates whether your local government or your municipality has financial capacity to fund the projected assets. That you are able to self-financing with none or very little borrowings from needed. That is, I won't explain what's the net present value of the planned and capital investments of renewables, which means the value of the funds needed produced by the cash flow in the next 10 or 15 years. What's the value, net present value of those cash flows in installments today, calculating the future. So if we have, let's say, as Excel can very easily calculate that instead of doing that on hand. So this ratio between planned capital investments divided by required capital investments from our capital plan, from our assessment plan, that ratio should be covered by 90 to 100%, which I said what we should do and what we can do. If this ratio is covered from 90 to 100%, then your local government or our municipality financial plans make adequate provision for maintaining the assets existing levels for service and renewal or replace. If it's lower than that, if it's lower, then it's not enough funds, then we have to borrow. If it's over 100%, then we are overspending, or maybe we are renewing or replacing the assets too early. So this is a slide which, next slide, thanks. As a sample, next slide, thank you. As a sample example about key performance indicators, I have done the Excel, which I'm going to show you on the end of the presentations very quickly, very briefly, which can easily be calculated for the roads. If we have priority critical assets investments in 2000, these are the critical assets which we have to replace in the first 2 years, and then the others in 2026 or up to 2028. And we have also new assets of 1 million to invest in 2025. If we have this plan shown on the table, what we can and what we can do, the last one is planned capital investments, then automatically we'll show the ratio, the three ratios, key performance indicators easily. And on the end, results here, for measurement results on the end. It's easy to be done. Next one, please. So we go on the end of the last session about information technology systems. And we're going to discuss what IT information technology we need for implementing our or enhancing our asset management information system. So we discussed a little bit yesterday. Marshall and Ajit has an excellent presentation. And the other question is, usually we ask ourselves, do all IT information technology specialists and municipality asset management team have to be also asset management experts, or vice versa? Do asset management experts have to be IT specialists? The real answer is not experts, but they have to know about procedures and steps, how to develop asset management information system. I'm talking about IT specialists, the procedures, the steps, what the results has to achieve, how it should be measured, and on the end, that should be also conveyed, and vice versa. Asset management has to have a knowledge of IT system using computers, a little bit advanced in Excel or database. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before we start, we're going to go to plenary, which are the best practices. Okay. What asset management integrated system, but before we discuss about what information technology or what information technology can do for you, I would like to ask, can we go for the plenary? Yes. Fernando, your turn. Thanks.
Yes, Vladimir. So, enviaremos una última encuesta de Zoom. Si nos pueden ayudar a responderla, por favor, que es ¿qué puede hacer para su gobierno, para su organización, un sistema de información para la gestión de activos? Entonces, les agradeceríamos puedan responder la pregunta. Entiendo que están viendo ya la ventana para las respuestas. ¿Es así? Vladimir, are you able to see the responses?
Yes, I'm looking at it.
So
I see that only. Sorry.
Please go ahead, because I'm not seeing the responses. So please go ahead.
Very little of the participants, they answer. 1% they don't use any IT software, which is for asset management, but most of them, they need it for storing data. They are using it for storing data. And the maximum, it's going quickly between develop plan, okay, and improve maintenance procedures. Excellent, yes. I must say, in our experience, thank you very much for your post. Now we can close it. From our experience, the first results when you have a municipality, when you have organized integrated asset management software or system, and when you have collected data in one place and asset registry done, the first hidden results or hidden costs on your effectiveness will be reduced drastically. And next step, as I see from the Zoom poll, is that you're using for the maintenance. The next step, asset management information system can help you a lot in reducing operating costs in maintenance procedures or in maintenance, all the maintenance activities. There we can see, let's say, 30 or 40% reducement of operation and maintenance cost with very simple tools. We can discuss that later on. Thank you very much for the poll. What asset management integrated software can do for you? Well, they can store data. Yes, that's true. It can process a large number of data and information. Using a GIS, geographic information system, can give you asset location, very precise asset location, and also to see the system of the asset system, not only the assets, but how it's combined with the assets as system. Let's say water supply with roads and the other data. Large memory of that use that can be also can help you and can do for you. But what asset management software cannot do for you? Never make a decision for you. So decisions can be made by given the right information. And information, yes, if you have a data, then you analyze the information using tools, and then somebody else can make a decision, not asset management software ever. Cannot collect the data from you, never. We know that it's very difficult, and it's a long process of collecting on-site data. So simple tool or advice I can give you in the manual, in the handbook, there is on chapter 5, there is in annex, there is a simple let's say template of how to use the collection data on site. That can be easily transferred. IT experts or even my daughter can do that. Transfer it into the tablet, those questions, and instead of going with paper on site and marking all these questions, you can use tablet or cell phones and quickly transfer it into the head office computer where the database is saved. So you lose time, you save time, and you're more efficient in collecting data. Evaluating the assets, they can validate data. They can't do it. You have to do it by yourselves on calling the experts. So never asset management software can never provide you leadership. So the leadership is provided by asset manager, so and mayor of the municipality. And also cannot improve your asset management practices. Asset management practices for asset management information system, it's set up in a book or procedures. Thank you very much. Can I have a next slide, please? Thank you. Before using asset information technology approved, if you have the first step using Excel or database, we should consider, you should ask first questions. Do we really need it? Are we ready for it? Those are the two crucial questions, because these asset information technology systems are very expensive. And we should ask also how well does existing software, which we are using, Excel or let's say, Microsoft Access or SQL are enough for now, or maybe we don't need it for the near future. Also, do we need vast volumes of data? If we need, then there is a problem. Yes, then we have to do something here. Will other software and IT equipment become available in next year or two, that we have to do the search on the market and see, because these IT solutions are very, very expensive and they are not really custom made for your organization. So that's why you have to do the market research and find out which is the best for you. I won't recommend custom-made software. It's the better if it's done by professionals, IT professionals, so you can shoot for the first time your municipal organization. Sorry. And there is a series of questions you should ask company who is, or you want to buy the software, how much it will additional session cost, or like cost of the equipment, how easily the data could be transferred, how secure the data is. All these questions you should ask before considering buying software. There's some principle. Next slide, please. Thank you. The issue is not what information technology software to be used, but what data information reporting should be developed for information and report sharing. We saw yesterday that there was a difficulty estimating or getting data for the assets controlled or owned and managed by the central government. So it's very important to share information, data on different governmental levels, from the local level, from municipality to regional, up to the central or national government agencies. Also, vice versa, we have to go backwards to see what information is needed in order to, for example, for asset management plan, when we have transfers of funds from the central government budgets, then we have to, we can't do such borrowings. We need the feedback information. So this system must be done on a local level between municipalities, and local utilities. Then maybe your municipality has several utilities in water supply, road maintenance, and things like that. And what data, what information, what reports your local government needs from the local utilities, what regional agency they need information from the local governments, and also what information central or government agency they need. That's very important set of flowing the information. We should be very careful that information should be accurate, relevant, updated, and timely. We don't share unrelevant information or not updated and very updated, not updated regularly. Information should be in multi-directional, not only on vertical, but also on the horizontal level between various agencies or companies, or even with the stakeholders. These procedures must be transparent. This will help us in future planning or in information sharing and decision for the replacement or renewal or maintenance of our assets. Adoption should be of sound policies and standards or information sharing because of the security of the data. This should be very precise, defined before we decide at how to share data. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will now ask you for homework to compile 5 key data points on your priority assets, which you previously have set, and define your asset management action plan. And from the last 3 years, that should be for your homework. And on the end, I have final word to say. Information analysis is the art of using the right data in asset management information system. And asset management is the art of using asset management information system to reach the infrastructure sustainability. Both disciplines are very important for your sustainable development. Thank you very much. I appreciate. I'm 15 minutes behind schedule. Sorry for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. Can you hear me, Vladimir? Muchas gracias a todos por seguir por aquí con nosotros. Estamos ya llegando al final de la presentación del día de hoy. Les enviaremos en un pequeño correo de agradecimiento y ahí mencionaremos nuevamente cuál es muy brevemente la tarea de esta sesión. Entonces les enviaremos por correo electrónico eso y cualquier cosita nos pueden preguntar. So Daniel, I don't know if you would like to close with a few remarks.
I'm sorry. Everybody probably is waiting for the samples Excel files we have done for this period.
Please.
Yes,
please,
I'm sorry. Yeah, everybody, can I share the screen now? Can this Excel file be seen? Or?
I believe it's loading, but yes, it's. So, Vladimir, are you sharing your screen? I believe we cannot see it. Estamos intentando para mostrarles muy rápidamente las plantillas de Excel que pueden recibir si están interesados para calcular métodos de depreciación, etcétera. Entonces, estamos por compartir la pantalla muy breve. Vladimir, I think we cannot see your screen.
Fernando?
Please, Daniel, go ahead.
Yes, so I think we lost Vladimir. There's some technical issue, but we will share those slides with you by email, okay? Fernando, I wanted to say a few words, but I give it back to you if you want to also say something.
No, please, Daniel, go ahead, please.
Great. Okay, so I think we're ready to close this meeting. So thank you to Vladimir and Fernando for doing a great job in managing this meeting. It was a very dense meeting with a lot of material. I sometimes also had trouble to follow, but that's just the nature of some aspects of asset management. I hope we shared some very useful tools with you. The good news is that we'll share all this material with you. You will have time to go over it. We have a recording of the entire session, so you can go to YouTube and you can stop and go back as much as you want to. And also the Spanish version of the book is almost ready. My guess is that we need another week or so to really put all the files together and upload it. We'll let you know about that. So we'll have the entire 420 pages or 419 pages of the handbook translated into Spanish for you. And you can go back to the material there. I think today we really learned a lot about a very systematic and methodological approach or methodical approach to data collection, and what that means for our information, and how important that information then is for decision making. And in that context, it's also incredibly important for our asset management action plan. You will recall that the homework of the first session was to compile this asset management action plan for priority asset. You know, if you have the right asset data, you will be able to anticipate future needs, you will reduce costs, and you ensure the serviceability of your critical asset. At the same time, we learned that ensuring the accuracy, the quality, and the quantity of the data is a real team effort. It's not expensive, but it requires commitment at the political and technical level to see it through. As we look at the asset management action plan that we started in the first round, we want to now see whether you can provide us a few key data indicators for that asset management action plan, for that priority asset in that asset management action plan. We suggest that you go back about 3 years and basically compile a very simple Excel spreadsheet for your priority asset with 5 key indicators. It could be, you know, the condition, the value, the location, whatever you think are the most important key indicators for that asset, right? Put those indicators there for your priority asset and go back for sort of 3 years, including this year, of course, and calculate the right data points. And of course, you know, keeping today's workshop in mind, you know, pay some attention to the actual evaluation of the asset, which we learned to do today. We are able to help you throughout this process. Please feel free to contact Fernando directly. You can contact me. You know, my Spanish is very limited, but if it's in Spanish, I will just immediately forward it to Fernando. If it's in English, I will try to answer it also myself. Again, there's also the generic email address of IAMH@un.org, which stands for Infrastructure Asset Management Handbook @un.org. All of these emails also go to me, go to Fernando and Luis, of course, as well. So we are there to help you. Don't feel shy to contact us. We can help you with the AMAP. We can help you with the data exercise. We're looking very much forward to seeing you in our next round, April 13th and April 14th. That will be the last round of the workshop. It'll deal with crisis resilience, in particular in the context of climate change, but also with some modules on health pandemics like COVID-19 and what that means for asset management. I will now give the floor back to Fernando just to answer some final questions that we haven't taken care of in the chat, or some of the questions that just arose because of this. But I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I'll thank you very, very much for sticking with us through a very dense but very well delivered presentation today. Fernando, you have the floor.
Thank you, Daniel. Muchas gracias a todos nuevamente. Solo insistir que por favor nos escriban un correo si tienen alguna duda sobre las tareas. Nos enviaremos un correo con las presentaciones y un pequeño resumen sobre las tareas pendientes. Nos preguntan si compartiremos las presentaciones. Sí. Si compartiremos las plantillas de Excel de Vladimir, sí, sin problema las podemos compartir. Por favor, envíenos un correo si tienen interés en recibirlas y con gusto se las compartiremos. Algunas otras. El manual sí ya estará pronto a publicarse en español en la página, entonces ya pronto lo podrán descargar ahí en los próximos días. Más o menos esas son las preguntas que hay. Sí, las presentaciones se compartirán. Las grabaciones de las sesiones también se compartirán por correo electrónico. Entonces, en estos próximos días van a recibir un correo con toda la información y los links a los distintos materiales. Entonces, perfecto. Me parece que eso es todo. Muchísimas gracias a todos por participar. Muchas gracias, Vladimir. Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you, Daniel. And thanks, everyone, for attending this second round of sessions. Muchas gracias a todos. Los esperamos el 13 y el 14 de abril para la última ronda de talleres. Muchas gracias.